Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL Draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner presented by the Hockey Writers. With the draft lottery happening last Monday, we now know the draft order for the top 16 selections in the first round of the 2023 draft, and a couple after, actually, but still sorting that out with the second round of the playoffs going on. With all that in mind, today we're going to be doing a top 16 mock draft, giving our thoughts and our best guesses on the final order of these picks on draft day in June. I think the 28th. I believe is day one of the draft, the first round. I'm your host, Logan Horn, and today I'm joined as always by my co-hosts and fellow prospect analysts, Matthew Zator and Peter Baracchini. Peter, how are you doing today? How are you recovering after the Leafs season ended?
Not so good. Got something now coming in the morning, so all my emotions and feelings will be in there. But I'm happy we won a round, but I just would have thought that it would have been a little bit more meaningful. I'm just going to leave it at that.
That's fair. It's nice to break through something, but then when it just didn't feel like anything else came from it, yeah, that's a little disappointing. I have my brother-in-law is a Leafs fan, and the moment after the game ended in overtime, I received a picture from my sister-in-law of him just like on his knees on the ground, just like curled up, and I was like, man, I'm sorry.
That was me, and I was doing a live reaction to that game. So
oh boy.
Yeah, you see the moment when hope just leaves my body. So
yeah, see, what I can only recommend is picking a team like Matt and I have that's bad, so that you never get your hopes up. You never get hurt like that. Right, Matt? That's how it goes. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm doing good. Trust me, I've had those feelings in the past. The Canucks were used to be good a long time ago now. But hopefully there's better in the future, like starting with this draft. We'll see if we can get a good Canucks and get a good player, but we'll see. Doing good. Like I say, the draft is getting closer and closer by the day, and excitement's just ramping up. So lots of great stuff coming. So it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's big time. Like draft lottery just happened. You might have seen our episode last week. Just afterwards, we were reacting to that, and our short reaction talking about it turned into a full-length episode. So that's how we do things around here sometimes. But so if you haven't heard, the Chicago Blackhawks won the first overall pick. Anaheim Ducks won the second overall pick, and everyone just kind of fit in after that. Columbus went down a spot, I believe.
Yeah.
Maybe the Sharks? No, they didn't. Just Columbus went down a pick. Technically, Anaheim went down one because they had the best odds at first overall. So that's our top of the draft, really. Everyone else just fit based on odds. So as I mentioned, we're going to do a bit of a mock draft here. We're all going to alternate. We've got teams set out here, and we're going to pick our best players based on, expectations for what the team needs, how the team likes to act in what kind of players they like to take in the draft at the top, anything like that. So I'm going to start us off with the easiest pick. Chicago Blackhawks select Connor Bedard first overall. The only no-doubter maybe in the whole thing. There's a little more. I'll let you guys talk about it because you guys have some of the next picks in the top three here, but it's becoming a bit more of a conversation around the rest of the top five. There's a general consensus of who the best players are, but no real agreement in where they'll go. But we'll see how that all lines up for you guys. Bedard's a no-brainer. It's not a lot to surround him with in Chicago next year. Lucas Reichel, probably not a lot of other top prospects coming into the NHL soon. Ryan Green looked great in college this year. Could probably be in the lineup in another year or two. Kevin Korchinski was one of the very best defensemen in junior hockey all year. That's a really positive sign for that team that needs to build from every position. And Frank Nazar missed most of the year due to injury. had a decent showing at the end, but he'll just look to bounce back mostly and have a good showing in Michigan next year. But Bedard, you're just going to start with him probably as your first line center, second line center based on ice time, maybe. Probably don't throw him to the Wolves quite like that, but maybe they do. And they hope it works out. There are some teams where it felt like, maybe you try him at center and then expect him to go to the wing. But for Chicago, you have no one else. There's no reason not to just play him at center. Mm-hmm. If the growing pains are intense, it's fine. You lose more games and you have a chance at Celebrini next year, Yzerman, Levshunov, whoever you want at the top of the draft next year. So it works out pretty well for the team. Easiest pick, like I said, Connor Bedard first overall. Next is Matt. You're picking second for Anaheim. Who do you have the Ducks taking?
Well, this is a close to a no-brainer, maybe. I mean, we'll see when the draft happens. But Anaheim Ducks select Adam Fantilli from the University of Michigan. He's probably the second best centerman in this draft, apart from Connor Bedard. Any other draft, he's probably the best. And he's shown that at the World Championships right now, I believe. And we'll see how he does throughout the tournament. But, for Anaheim, you're getting a top line center. We'll see if Zegras moves to the wing, plays with them on the top line, and he's not the center and he plays wing, which we can definitely do. I think he did do that last season at times. You got Mason McTavish there. You could go Fantilli, Zegras, McTavish, whatever. I mean, you've got pretty good versatility there in the center ice position. So Fantilli, I think, would fit in really well in Anaheim as well, with how they're structured. And I mean, they don't have a head coach right now, so I mean, we'll see how that kind of plays out. But if they do select Fantilli, which everyone kind of anticipates that happening, I think he'll end up fitting in with that system, because the players that they got, I think, really fit around him. Even if Zegras doesn't play with him, I think he would fit really well with Fantilli as a winger, or Zegras plays center and Fantilli plays the wing, whatever you want to do. But yeah, Fantilli to the Ducks, I think that's probably what'll happen, and it's happening in this mock draft. So
nice. Yeah, I mean, that's the pick I would probably go with as well. More and more talk about possibly some of the teams in the top, 2, 3, 4 slots kind of having different ideas than the public consensus. But also, as you mentioned, them having 3 excellent centers in Zegras, McTavish, and in this Fantilli, like, that's a pretty sweet problem to have, trying to figure out how to line them up. That's maybe the best problem. So many teams never quite get 2 of those guys, and they'll have 3. So that's not so bad. Peter, you're selecting next, third overall for the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Yeah, this is kind of an easy one for me, and I'm pretty sure Matt took him last time when he was doing Columbus, and I'm going to take Leo Carlsson. I mean, I think that is an absolute no-brainer. Yeah, you could also look at Will Smith, considering the U18 tournament that he had. I mean, almost 3 points per game. But Leo Carlsson is like that prototypical centerman that can do it all. And obviously, before we were talking about like player comparables, and even before the season started, there were some comparables to that of even Matt Sundin. Again, he's not going to be Matt Sundin. Let's just reiterate that, but he does have similar qualities: the patience, the smarts, the awareness, the shooting, the ability to get to the middle of the ice and the net. Sundin did all of that, and Carlsson has that type of mindset and ability to be a factor in the offensive zone. He's very patient. He knows how to open himself up. And, the Blue Jackets' depth up the middle, really not that great. I mean, obviously, you still have decent players like Jack Roslovic, Boone Jenner, Ken Johnson, who can play both center and wing. But after that, in terms of their prospects, Luca Del Belbelou's great option, but he isn't a number 1 center. Leo Carlsson is your number 1 2-way centerman that can do it all and play in any situation. Is he going to put up maybe the points that Fantilli or Bedard may put up? Probably not. But if you're looking at at least 70 points average for a season for a centerman who can distribute the puck well, shoot the puck 60, 70 around there. I think that's a really good framework for him because he's a everyday centerman that can do it all. And I think he's going to be a great fit for the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough to argue with that. I think Carlsson's size helps, but also just the maturity of his game playing against pros all year in the SHL. He's had to really like hone in on what he's good at and get really confident in that and play to his strengths, because if you try just doing a bunch of new stuff when you're playing against grown men, you're going to get benched. That didn't happen to him. He played a ton this year.
Yeah,
I think that's a really positive sign. Also a positive sign that he's close to ready for the NHL, which wouldn't hurt Columbus, who of the bottom, I'll say out of the bottom 4 teams here, the top 4 selections, the Columbus Blue Jackets were the only ones like truly trying to make the playoffs this year. Maybe San Jose you could put in there, but I feel like Columbus was really trying, and injuries just dragged them down immediately to start the year, and they never quite dug their way out of it. So, getting them a center who can finally give them that top line center spot on their depth chart for once in their franchise history is pretty sweet. It's a pretty sweet fit. So I like that one.
And also looking good at the World Championships right now too. So
yeah, he's the youngest player Sweden has ever brought to the World Championships, and he's the youngest player to score for Sweden at the World Championships after scoring on Sunday. Yeah, he's looking pretty good. That's fair to say. Played some time as their top line center for Sweden, not just the Columbus Blue Jackets, for Team Sweden. It's pretty impressive for an 18-year-old. Okay, so I'm picking now 4th for San Jose Sharks. And our last one, I took Michkov here, which I think kind of makes sense because they're not ready to be good, and they can move on from Erik Karlsson probably and just kind of kick off the rebuild fully. But I'm going to go a little bit of a different route because I know his stock has been rising significantly, and I think there are a few teams that'll have questions about Russian players. I'm going to go with Will Smith at 4 to the Sharks from the US NTDP, as well as Gabe Perreault. He became one of the very first players to finish a season in the NTDP over 2 points per game. The only player other than those two that's ever done it is Jack Hughes, who you might have seen scoring 40 goals, 99 points in the regular season this year as like a 22-year-old or something, which is just absurd. I'm not saying Will Smith is going to be Jack Hughes, but the deception's there, the delay game is there. There's some similarities. Doesn't have the elite skating that most of the Hughes boys have, but Will Smith is going to be a really good centerman. I think that it's going to be tough for teams in the top 4 to take Michkov over some of these other prospects that we've all picked in a row here, just because they're a little more of a sure thing, both projection-wise and contract-wise, with the situation in Russia and some players having trouble getting over, although we've seen lots of Russian prospects signing in North America over the last few weeks, but none of them are like the future of Russian hockey like Michkov is. So there's a chance that the KHL is quite protective of him when his contract runs out. I've also seen some talk about how most NHL teams are looking at this draft the same way they did last year. So if your team picked Russian players relatively early, you can be pretty confident that they'll feel safe doing it again. But if this team didn't touch Russian players very much, you can probably be confident that they're not going to do it again. So that kind of colors where Russian players might land. Well, it certainly will on draft day, but especially in our mock draft, it might affect it a bit. So I've got Will Smith going 4, which is pretty wild. Michkov is still on the board. Who knows how far he'll fall? And I'll leave that to you, Matt, to decide how far he falls. I guess who knows? You're picking 5th for the Montreal Canadiens. Who do you got there?
Well, he's not falling anymore. Mapping Michkov to the Montreal Canadiens. I'm being informed here on that the Canadiens aren't discounting him as being a pick at where they are. A few articles I've read been around that, and that they'll do their homework about about Michkov, and I would not be surprised if they picked him, because it's not like the Canadiens need him at this point. They're a rebuilding team. They've got a lot of talent already on the wing. And, they can wait for Michkov to come over. And his skill is just so high that if they feel like the risk is worth it, I think they'll pick him. And in this mock draft, they are picking him. So I think he'll fit in with the skill-based game that the Canadiens have. Their development program has been looked as top-notch this past season. The way they've kind of restructured their front office, being more focused on development, and that's helped a few players already. Cole Caulfield being one, and Martin St. Louis seems like a very good coach for these types of players. And I think Michkov would be a really good pick for them, because, like I say, that skill is just off the charts. I've said in the past, he'll probably score 50 goals in the NHL. The Canadiens have a lot of skill. They have a lot of smaller players, and Michkov's not massive, but he's not small. And he's got just that goal scoring ability that a lot of players don't have. And I think, teams at this high in the draft, I think Montreal could be one of the ones, like the Ducks we said in the past too, being a team that could pick them and be able to wait, because it's not like they need them at this point. And I think the Canadiens would do really well to get Michkov at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to justify any other prospect over him at this point. Although I wouldn't be shocked if a team does it on or two or three does it on draft day, but the gap in talent is significant here. I will say though that I think I've probably mentioned this a few months ago, but I think it really rings true that if you're a general manager and you want to select Matvei Michkov, you should probably make sure that your contract runs until he arrives in the NHL. That's a big risk for your job security. Not that it's a bad pick, but if the team doesn't turn it around because the best player in the system is overseas, that might not reflect the best on you, even if it was the right move.
Yeah.
I just want to take a quick look at the top five. So we've got Bedard, Fantilli, Karlsson, Smith, Michkov. Peter, I'll come to you first. What do you think of that top five? Do you think that's pretty much exactly how it'll end up? Do you think anyone drops out? Do you think Michkov drops or anyone jumps in? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the only wild card there is Michkov, because of not necessarily just his contract, but I've even saw his ability and production against other teams, how it wasn't that great. And yeah, he was playing on, the second worst team, and most of his points came against the worst team. So you have to wonder about his production against some of that as well. His, is that kind of play going to translate? That kind of goes into, the section of doubt if he's able to be a top five. But then again, we've seen what he can do internationally before, when Russia was still available for those international tournaments, the U18s, the World Juniors, before, everything happened. And Michkov was always at the forefront, and he was playing at a reasonable pace and producing against players older than him. So I think maybe that is going to be the big wild card, but we'll see where things end up, because he definitely can put the puck in the back of the net, and teams love goal scorers. That is definitely for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the only thing that matters really in the NHL. Scoring goals, you win games. But I mean, there are lots of questions about projectability. I mean, started the season playing in the VHL and stuff for Michkov. He kind of just floats at the blue line and waits for a puck, because that's what his team needed from him. And they didn't need him to play a structured game. They just needed him to score a goal whenever they could get the puck to him. I did think in the KHL he looked better in that, because he had to play in a system, and I think he grew into that. Obviously, like you mentioned, I think it was 8 of his 20 points came against Kunlun Red Star in the KHL, the worst team by a good margin. But as we mentioned a little while ago, all these stats are cherry picked. So historical stats, like if you're trying to compare his draft year KHL scoring to to like Alex Ovechkin or something, I'm sure Ovechkin scored points against the worst teams in his league as well. So I don't think it's fair to discount one player for one thing while not looking at the same issues with other prospects. Still not saying he's Ovechkin. Do not take that as me saying he's Ovechkin. But you know, that's it's fair to dig a little deeper into that thought also. Matt, what are your thoughts on this top five? Do you think this top five group, I think we all kind of agree, is the top five on talent, but do you think that's where the top five will actually end up on draft day?
Yeah, even though I did pick Michkov for the Canadiens, there is some uncertainty there. I mean, he could drop out of there. He could drop into this, closer to the 10. I don't think he'll drop further than top 10. I really think teams are not going to be like, no, we can't. We're going to bypass him just because of the Russian factor and all that. Because I think you'll be kicking yourself 5 years down the road and he's scoring 30, 40 goals in the NHL consistently and you could have picked him. I think so. I think he's probably the most, like you say, biggest wild card in this top five. But there's teams there like the Canadiens that may take a swing on him because of his potential and the fact that they can take that risk because of the fact that they do have another first round pick in this draft. And they could use that for another talent and getting Michkov here. I mean, if Will Smith was still on the board, he would have been picked for me because I think he has a bigger connection to the Canadiens, but since he's gone, but overall, I think the top four is for sure. Michkov, maybe not.
Yeah, that's fair. I get the sense that Michkov won't fall any further than 8th or 9th, just because Washington, we always make the connection to them with their top Russian players over the last 20 years now. But they took Ivan Miroshnichenko in the draft last year. They're not afraid of getting those Russian guys, and they already got him over to North America. Mutually terminated his contract in Russia early and is coming over already. So I don't know if they'll think they have a chance of doing that with Michkov early, but I feel like they wouldn't be too deterred. And then also Detroit took Dmitry Buchelnikov early in the second round last year, which shocked pretty much everyone because nobody knew who he was, including myself. So they're not afraid to take their Russian players in the same organization as Michkov there, actually. But also he fits all of their needs, basically. So I can't see him on the board when St. Louis picks at 10, but he could go anywhere else in the top 10 and I wouldn't be shocked. All right, let's jump back in here at 6th overall. And Peter, you're picking for the Arizona Coyotes, their first pick in this top 16.
Yeah, it's going to be Zach Benson from the Winnipeg Ice. And obviously they went with Logan Cooley last year. Obviously he had he had higher upside, high energy, high pace of play. And Benson is basically the exact same type of player where his motor doesn't stop running. He's always on the go. He's always energetic. And we saw the way that Logan Cooley could take charge of a shift as a centerman. Zach Benson could do that even no matter where he is, on the left side, right side, up the middle. He takes advantage of his opportunities and he's always attacking, always willing to go into the corners. And I think the Coyotes are going to try and replicate that with their first round pick this time around. Again, they seem to be heading in that direction, especially when they get those high-end picks. They want players who are smart, can dictate the pace of play and be a factor in all three zones. And Benson can do just that, just like Logan Cooley. So Benson is going to be my pick.
Oh, that's a fun one. I mean, that team's going to be really fun really soon. And Zach Benson would go a long way with that. I'm a little bummed he's off the board here already. I'm picking at 7th for the Philadelphia Flyers, and I'm kind of torn, but I'm gonna go for Ryan Leonard. It feels like a bit of a Flyers guy to me, both with the NTDP connection, but also the style of play. You watched the playoffs this year, and obviously one of these players only lasted one round, but you look at like Matthew Tkachuk, Tyler Bertuzzi, these guys that are just infuriating to play against, but the guys that you just absolutely love to watch on your team, scoring goals, making plays, getting people upset, drawing penalties by being a little bit of a rat if you need to be. That's kind of what I see in Ryan Leonard. I've seen more and more offense in his game this year. I think he scored over 50 goals for the NTDP, which is wild. Tons of points. Obviously, he's on that loaded top line with Smith and Perreault. But he's a real driver. And I coined a new term. I actually don't know if I'm the one who came up with it. Someone else probably came up with it first. But I coined a new term in my latest draft rankings for Leonard. I called him a snowplow. So a snowplow is a player who just like clears the path for everyone else, makes everything so much easier on his teammates. He works so hard, wins puck battles, makes good passes, charges into traffic to make space for teammates. He's going to be a really good NHL player, and I feel like there's a decent shot. He played center a lot before joining the NTDP. A lot of top forward prospects do before they move to the wing. But I think he has what it takes to be an NHL center, especially if a team believes in him and can put him on the development track that way. And that's exactly what Philadelphia did last year with Cutter Gauthier. They sent him to NCAA to play as center. He was excellent this year. And he's looking like a top 6 center for them in the future in the NHL. So I wouldn't be shocked to see them do the same with Leonard, who I think could fit that bill pretty well and kind of be a part of that, Broad Street Bullies culture that exists in Philly still. I think that'd be a fun landing spot for Leonard. 8 is you, Matt, picking for the Washington Capitals. I'm not gonna get over how weird it is to see the Capitals in the top 10. But who do you have them taking here, Matt?
Well, Washington Capitals gonna take Dalibor Dvorsky from the AIK Hockey Allsvenskan. We talked about how he played at the World U18s and how he dominated for Slovakia. And the Washington Capitals, they need centermen. They got, they don't have as much depth there as they used to, and high-end depth. I think Dvorsky would really fit in down the road with the team. I think they're also really, like you say about drafting Russians. I mean, yeah, Dvorsky's not Russian, but he's European, and they do draft a lot of players from around that area. Swedish, Finnish, Russian, maybe not Finnish, but definitely Russian and Swedish. And so Dvorsky, I think, would fit really well in there. I mean, they're getting a new coach as well. So you really don't know what type of system they're going to go down the road. And with Ovechkin probably retiring in the next, I want to say 5, maybe 3-4 years, I think he'll stay around to try to beat that Gretzky record. But then I think after that he'll retire. But they're going to need some guys after him. And Dvorsky, I think, has a really high end potential in the NHL. Like you say, he's shown that good two-way game already. And at the U18s there, he really showed off his goal scoring ability, leading Slovakia there. So I think Dvorsky really would fit with the Washington Capitals. So he's going here at 8.
Yeah, it's a good call. It feels like he's really risen back up into the top 10 conversation. I've seen these are people that talk about Michkov falling, having Dvorsky as high as 5 or 6, which would be pretty bold, but seems like some people are really high on him at the moment. So next up is back to you, Peter. 9th overall, you're picking for the Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah, it's funny because I was actually going to take Dalibor Dvorsky for the Red Wings, but since he is off, it's time to go to Plan B, and I think that Plan B is going to be Colby Barlow from the Owen Sound Attack. Again, the verdict is still out there if he's really a top 10 player, because he has matured so quickly and his game has taken a new height so fast that you don't know his projectability at this point. But, he did have 46 goals in his second OHL season, just under the 50 mark. And I think he's what the Red Wings need. They have a lot of creativity and skill, and that's not to say that Barlow doesn't have the creativity and skill, but they have a lot more playmakers and players with puck skill, and Barlow can find the back of the net with such ease, getting open to receive those passes from players like Jonathan Berggren, Lucas Raymond, Dylan Larkin as well, if he's able to be into that, top line role. And also, he's a power forward-like player. He's your player that replaces Tyler Bertuzzi. And the fact that he's developing that two-way game still, the fact that you have that mentality, that player to get on a forecheck, be smart, and also prioritize defense, I think that's a good start for the Red Wings to try and bolster up and replace what they lost at the deadline.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fair pick. I think Detroit probably needs to go for a forward with their top pick here because, that's kind of like they need goals when you look at their roster. They need a finisher. Barlow's a finisher. That's a pretty good fit. I think, what was I going to say? They have another pick at 17 where they could go for a defenseman at either one of those spots. And I think they'd ideally like a centerman, but most teams would, which is why Dvorsky's off the board already for us. Mm-hmm. Leonard, who could be a center, is off the board, and then all those top four players are all centermen. They're all off. Wow, Carlson's debatable just because he's played wing a lot this year, but he's a centerman mostly. That's a fun one. I like it. Colby Barlow to Detroit. We're actually just going to take a quick break here before jumping back into the back half, the rest of our mock draft here. So we're going to take a quick break for a word from the Hockey Writers.
Interested in writing for the Hockey Writers? If you have experience writing about hockey, are passionate about the sport, and are looking to take your writing to the next level, the Hockey Writers could be the place for you. Here at THW, you will have the opportunity to hone your craft at one of the world's largest and most respected hockey publishers. You will have control over what you write, be able to seek out media credentials, and be supported by a large network of writers and editors. Plus, you'll get paid for doing it. If you're interested and want to know more about team openings and requirements, please visit the Write for THW page on the Hockey Writers website. A link to that page is also listed in the description.
All right, so we're gonna finish off the rest of our mock draft here, our top 16, and the next pick is 10th overall, and I'm picking for the St. Louis Blues there. Oh, I hadn't thought about this actually. I should have thought about this. I'm gonna go with someone who I don't think will still be on the board here, but if he is, they're gonna absolutely snap him up, and that's David Reinbacher at 10 for St. Louis. It's been, well documented that their decor is old and overpaid and not great in St. Louis. I've just to put it lightly, it's not great. It hasn't worked out very well. And Reinbacher would go a long way in, injecting some youth, injecting an entry-level contract and a right-hand shot. He's going to be a good player. You may have seen on Sunday against Sweden, he's playing for Austria at the World Championships. He got hit by Rasmus Sandin, and he left the game. And no news yet, as of recording, how he's doing. If he's going to return to the tournament or not, who knows? So that could be a factor. Will almost certainly be a factor here. It was last year for David Jiricek, even though his injury was 6 months before the draft. So having your injury like a month and a half before is probably going to be pretty big factor, and depends on what the injury is. So hoping everything goes well for David there. But if he's here at 10, St. Louis takes him, no doubt in my mind. Matt, you might be a little upset picking next for Vancouver, but I feel like he's that's a spot I need in St. Louis as well. So I've got them with Reinbacher. As I mentioned, Matt, you're picking next, 11th overall for Vancouver. Who do you have?
Sad face that Reinbacher didn't drop to 11. He was close.
I'm just trying to set your expectations.
But I'm going to go a different direction than I've had in the past. Everyone knows I love Axel Sandin-Pellikka, but looking more deeper into what the Canucks need, Pellikka's more like Quinn Hughes. So you're basically getting another Quinn Hughes type defenseman. As much as I love him as a defenseman, the Canucks need someone else. So I'm going to go with Nate Danielson, centerman from the Brandon Wheat Kings. A lot like Bo Horvat. I mean, he is very, and it was funny because he's going around the same place that Horvat did at 9th overall when he was drafted. And Danielson is a lot of that two-way center ability shutdown guy, can win faceoffs and match up against the top players in the other team. So, I mean, he really reminds me of Bo Horvat. So, I mean, if you're getting Danielson, you're just getting a guy like Horvat again. I mean, he may be a bit more skilled than Horvat, just looking at him, but he's a very well-rounded centerman. One of those guys that you're not afraid to put out in those key situations like Horvat. So, I mean, I think if Reinbacher's off the board, I think the Canucks go for a right-handed centerman, and because they need that in their system too. I mean, Elias Pettersson's their top center. Miller's older. Who else is after that? There's not really anyone in the system that can take over as a second line center. So Danielson would be a really good pick, I think, at 11.
I agree with you there. I like Danielson to Vancouver a lot. I've seen him land there in a few mock drafts, and I like the fit. The need is there for them. Some people question Danielson's upside, which I think is kind of fair because he's a little bit on the older side for the draft year. Points haven't popped like crazy, but I don't think it's fair to say it's not like he has offense, because he was in the top 20 of the WHL scoring as a draft eligible, and none of his teammates are anywhere close to that high on the scoring list. So I think it's fair to think that give him some better teammates and he could succeed quite, like he could pop off a little bit, I think. But
they
it feels like
Horvat's upside too, and when he was drafted. So
yeah, that's true. And I do get the comparison there. I think that's a pretty interesting one for Canucks fans. Although I will say, like, Horvat upside was a question, but also his skating was a real question coming out of the draft. I don't have that question with Danielson. I feel a little more confident in the skating already. So, there's potential for more. You see the hands come out every once in a while, and you're like, ooh, this could be good. So I guess the dream is for him to bump Miller back to the wing and be a great second line center in Vancouver, which I can see happening. Feels like
Miller's
a fun.
Going to be here for a while.
He sure is. Peter, I'll come back to you here. You picked 6th overall for Arizona, and you got Benson. You're picking again for them, 12th overall, with Ottawa's pick in the Jacob Chychrun trade. Who do you have Arizona taking 12th overall?
I am going back to, let's make it the 3rd national team development program player, and Oliver Moore to the Arizona Coyotes. And, obviously I talked about how Benson kind of complements, Cooley in the same type of play style that he plays. Well, Moore's just exactly the same way. High octane, speed, creativity, is very, very deceptive, kind of like Cooley and Benson as well. So the fact that you have a top 6 winger in with that 6th overall pick, you get your 2nd overall center right now, and having Cooley and Moore as your, your go-to pivots down the middle, that is going to be very entertaining and very exciting, especially the way that Moore has kind of played second fiddle to, the top line of the national development team. I think if he gets his opportunity and he gets those minutes, he's going to pop off and he's going to be a dynamic player.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought when you said that, I was like, man, I feel like they might need a defenseman. And then I was thinking about like Cooley, Moore, Benson, Keller, Gunther, and I'm like, man, that would be fun.
You can't pass that up.
That'd be a ton of fun. They're the only team with 2 picks in the top 16 at this point in time before any trades happen or anything. So they have the freedom to do whatever they want. They're gonna have 2 great players in this kind of, there's the top 5-6 guys, and then there's this whole big tier of players that it could happen in any order, and I wouldn't be surprised. Like Moore going 12th, I'm like, that feels about right, but he could go 7th, and I wouldn't be shocked to Philly there. I don't know. I feel like they could go for a defenseman, but as soon as I started thinking a little more about Moore ending up there, I was like, no, I like it too. I like this a lot. I can't complain. That's pretty sweet. Okay, so who does that leave for me? I'm picking 13th for Buffalo. Oh, this one's never going to get easier. They've got lots of good forwards, both in the NHL, just breaking in, and then in their prospect pool. I'm going to go, and their left-sided defense is absolutely stacked. I'm going to go with Axel Sandin-Pellikka, just to really solidify their decor on the right side, because Matthias Samuelsson, who's one of their gets some of the most ice time on the right side, is a lefty, and he's paid pretty well, but he's a good player too. So Owen Power, Rasmus Dahlin, Axel Sandin-Pellikka, like that decor is going to be unbelievable for quite some time. As you said, Matt, with Sandin-Pellikka, the dream is for him to turn into a Quinn Hughes type, who defends by just always having the puck. People think Quinn Hughes isn't good at playing defense, it's just because he plays defense differently. He's not fighting guys off to get the puck back. He just always has it, and then he passes it out of pressure. So you don't see him defend because he's too smart to have to defend. So the dream is for Sandin-Pellikka to turn into that kind of player. And if you get like 80% of the way there with the group already going in Buffalo there, that's going to be crazy good. Line him up with Power, who's a bit bigger, maybe a little more defensively minded a little bit than some of the other defensemen on the team. And that could be a super fun pairing. Buffalo has tons of forwards. They took 3, I believe, in the first round last year. All of them looking pretty good, especially Yuri Kulich has been just unreal, scoring like a goal per game in the playoffs right now in the AHL. And he was drafted at the end of the first round, and nobody really knew who he was. And he's been unbelievable in the AHL as a teenager, doing great in the playoffs too now. So I think they're set for now at forward, although, Gabe Perreault, Matthew Wood, Sam Honzek, like there's plenty of good players they could take, and I wouldn't be upset if I was them either. Matt, you're up again here, picking 14th overall for Pittsburgh, another team that's just a little weird to see in these lottery picks, but what do you got?
This is going to be a tough one because they've got a full influx front office. They have no idea what the heck's happening there. They don't have a GM. They don't have a president. And at this point, they're looking at Kyle Dubas. So, I mean, maybe Dubas ends up there and that'll end up changing draft. I don't know. We'll see. But at this point, looking at needs, they actually, if Sandin-Pellikka was still here, I would have picked him because they need another leader on defense. But since he's gone, they're going to go, and this is a tough one because there's quite a few good players still here at this point. They're going to go Riley Heidt, Prince George Cougars. They need, Crosby and Malkin are pretty close. I think they're going to be retiring in the next probably couple, 3-4 seasons, maybe. So they need someone to they don't really have anyone that can succeed them. I'm not saying Height's going to be a top line centerman that's going to be in that realm, but he's a very skilled player. So, I think they're going to look, they could look at wingers too. They need that too, but you see a centerman, and Height is probably your best center. Braden Yeager is in there as well, left on the board. So they're going to go with Height though. And we'll see how he does. I think he's a great playmaker. Like I say, I don't know if he's up there as for sure a top line center, but a top 6 for sure. So I think I'm not sure if this is where Pittsburgh will go, but I'm going with Height right now. We'll see.
Yeah, go for it. I like it. I feel like when he has a little bit of time to adjust the NHL, I think Height's going to be just like a free zone entry when you get him the puck. Like, he's so fast and his hands are quick enough. I feel like he's just too slippery. He's just going to get into the zone, no problem. Well, not no problem. It's the NHL. Everyone has problems, but still, I think he's going to be really good at that. And it's pretty encouraging to see him taking tons of important faceoffs, even though he's just a draft eligible in the WHL. But like whenever there's a big face-off, D-zone, end of the game, something like that, Riley Heidt is the first to the dot. So that's pretty encouraging for sure. Peter, we've got you next, taking the 15th overall pick for the Nashville Predators. Who do you got?
I am going to take Matthew Wood from the University of Connecticut. Obviously, you look at their depth chart, aside from Philip Forsberg, they do have, Zachary Leroux, they have Reed Schaefer, but he could also play center. And you look at the center position, if Wood projects as a centerman, they're kind of thin up the middle as well. So he gives them depth, he gives them stability, and it gives him another powerful shot to work with. He's really dynamic. Obviously, there were some issues with the skating, but the way that he was able to take control in his freshman year, the way that he was dominant for Canada at the U18s, he really stood out for them. And I think that's going to catch the Sabres' eye and give them options because he can play both center and wing. So we'll see what happens, but I really like him for the Sabres. Predators. I don't know why I was saying Sabres there.
All good.
Wow.
All good.
Way off.
All good. No, that's all right. I like Wood to Nashville, especially if they think he can make it as a centerman. He played wing for most of the year in college, but but there's a chance. Like, I don't see why he couldn't try a year in college at center, or at least get more ice time there, see if it's a fit. That'd be a dream for Nashville. But regardless, as you said, his play at the U18s was huge. Definitely a positive for his draft stock. And on that really good top line with Ritchie and Celebrini. But Wood feels like a good fit there. I've got the last pick of our top 16, the Calgary Flames at 16th. And this is tough. There's so many guys. I'm just going to throw out some honorable mentions just to mention names that I think are in play at this range. You've got Gabe Perreault, who I'm not taking, but I think could make a lot of sense. Just super talented winger. Callum Ritchie, who I think did himself a lot of favors at the U18s, could go this high as a center prospect. Braden Yeager, maybe. Someone who jumped like crazy at that tournament is Tom Willander of Sweden. He was on their second D pairing behind Sandin-Pellikka, but he's a big right-hand shot, can skate very well. Kind of like David, like, looking at it with the least details possible, just the most like pie in the sky view. It's like David Reinbacher with slightly less offense. Like, he's not that far behind Reinbacher. That's just how many talented forwards are in this draft, that they bump everyone down a ways. But Willander might be a name to watch in the top 20, genuinely, even though nobody, including us, was talking about him before this tournament very much. But my pick ultimately for Calgary, as a team that is going to be pretty desperate to get back into competition, to get a player that is almost there for them, or that will be really good pretty soon, I'm going to go with Samuel Honzek, the Vancouver Giants. I'm a big fan of Honzek. I think he's going to go in the top 16. There's a chance he's towards the top 10, really. He's really big, skates really well, drives to the net, has a good shot, good goal scoring instincts. If he didn't get injured at the World Juniors, which took him out for quite a while, I think he likely would have ended up. He was at least on pace to be in the top 10 in WHL scoring. Would have been in that range of like Cohen Zimmer, Riley Height, that same kind of range, as someone that was virtually unknown before the year because he was coming to the CHL from the import draft from Slovakia. But Honzek has had an excellent year, and a big fast finisher. Feels like something Calgary could use with all this talent coming in. Maybe Matt Coronado has enough finishing for them next year if he makes the team, but you'll take as many kicks at the can as you can, finding the right finisher to pair with Jonathan Huberdeau, and that could be Honzek. So he's my pick at 16th. I've got just one quick fire question for you guys here before we do our prospects of the week and wrap up our show. So as we mentioned before, Leo Carlsson has looked really good all year, but made Team Sweden at the World Championships as a teenager, the youngest player ever to make their team at the World Championships to play for them. And then he already scored a goal, so he's the youngest to do that for them as well. What are your guys' thoughts on Leo Carlsson possibly leapfrogging Adam Fantilli and becoming the second overall pick? Peter, I'll come to you first here. What are your thoughts? Do you think it's possible? How likely?
Ooh. I want to say that it's like maybe a 5% chance that happens. I mean, as much as I love Leo Carlsson and I've been on the hype train since the beginning of the season, I just can't see it. Fantilli is just more dynamic, more creative. I mean, again, not to say that Carlsson isn't creative, but he has more of that high-end elite level hockey sense where he's able to be a factor offensively. He's got a better shot and release. Just absolutely all over the offensive zone. He plays with a little bit more of an edge, more intensity, and I think teams are going to like that a little bit more. Carlsson utilizes his size to his advantage. He's not as overly physical, but he can still win puck battles and get the inside edge to get good positioning. But I think Fantilli has more projectable upside than Carlsson, and he could be a little bit more dynamic. So I'm just going to go with Fantilli over Carlsson.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not trying to trick you here. There's a that answer does feel kind of like the right one for now, at least. Matt, what are your thoughts on? Do you think Karlsson has a chance at jumping to second overall? Do you think it's 95% for Fantilli, or is it even higher for you?
There's a chance. I mean, I think I'll up it to 10% just so. No, it is tough because I think the one thing about Anaheim, and you're looking at the team that could pick overall, like their scouting don't seem to gravitate towards the European players. They do draft a lot of those, North American prospects. It seems, at least. I mean, they're a relatively new front office. Pat Verbeek just took over as GM not that long ago. You don't really know their philosophy for drafting yet, really. I think you'll get it more solidified in this one, but that's not really shown at the top of the draft. I mean, Fantilli is probably a consensus second overall pick in a lot of places. But I can't deny that Karlsson has definitely increased his stock to close that gap that you're talking about. Yes, he has a chance. I mean, before, I don't know if anyone really gave him a chance to be second overall. And there was even talk of him being in the 3-4 spot. The 4, in that 5 area. Now he's basically, you're pretty much saying Columbus is going to pick him at 3. So, I mean, but like our own Mark Shagg, he's got an article coming out about, will be out by the time you see this, is that what Anaheim does is basically what they're is gonna make their decision, because, well, obviously, if Karlsson does go to Anaheim, they're picking Fantilli. So, I don't know. We'll see. I think Fantilli's going too, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you guys. Fantilli is by far the most likely pick at second overall. I just wonder if Karlsson's he's so aware of what he's good at, and he's so confident in that, and he's so mature defensively and just structure wise that I wouldn't be surprised to see Anaheim go into maybe those interviews at the draft combine and just come away from it like, maybe this is going to be a harder decision than we thought. I think at least he's making it hard on them, and hopefully he scores a couple more goals at the World Championships to make it even more confusing, just because that's fun for us. All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to wrap up our show as we love to do each week, going over our prospects of the week. Matt, I'll come to you first here. Who's your prospect of the week?
Well, continuing the trend of me going away from Canucks prospects, I'm going to go with a prospect that is not a prospect of any team right now, and that's Thomas Milic. We've talked about him. Why isn't he drafted? Why doesn't he have an NHL team beside his elite prospects? Saying that he's property of a team. He's just been lights up with the Seattle Thunderbirds in this playoffs. He leads the league in goals against average. The Seattle Thunderbirds are just a fire wagon of a team right now. I mean, they've got so much talent. Dylan Genther, I believe, I'm just going to look that up. I think he leads the league, or tied with Connor McClellan in goals in the playoffs. And you're looking at Milic, and he's got, like I say, 1.94 goals against average, 932 save percentage, leads both. He's got 13 wins. What more can this guy do to get picked by a team? I mean, come on. We talked about him being, I believe this is his last chance, right? In this draft to get drafted.
Yeah, this is his last draft.
So, he's got one more chance, and I think he's doing enough to get picked. Someone pick this guy, please. He really deserves to be picked at this point, not just out of pity or anything, but because of what he's done in these last, at the World Juniors, at now in the playoffs in WHL. He could end up winning a Memorial Cup at the end of this as well, and probably be a big factor in it. So Milic is my prospect of the week. Just putting out the vibes. Someone draft him, please.
If he doesn't get drafted, I guarantee within 5 minutes of his rights being open to just being signed, his agent is going to get maybe 32 calls.
Yeah.
Like he's he's up there. I think teams just seem to be too nervous to take a goalie that is 2 years past their draft or something. But as soon as they're eligible to just sign him outright, I guarantee someone will snap him up then. Thank you for that one. Thomas Milic is a great one. He's been a fun story, although a little disheartening maybe at this point. It'd be a great feel-good story if he gets drafted this year. Yeah. I'll go for mine quick. Kartye is my prospect of the week. Not really a prospect because he's in the NHL, but he's only played, I think, 9 games, and they're all in the playoffs, so I think it counts. He's an undrafted player out of the OHL, signed by Seattle. He was on the OHL's 3rd team All-Star last year. Never had like insane stats in the OHL. You know, sometimes these guys that have really flashy stats when they hit 19, 20 years old, you're like, okay, but they're 20 years old. He didn't even have those stats, so it was like, okay, it kind of makes sense. He never made it through the draft process. Signed by Seattle, though, played this year for the Coachella Valley Firebirds, their AHL affiliate, and won the AHL Rookie of the Year. He had 57 points in 72 games as a rookie in the AHL. Scored 28 goals as a rookie in the AHL, which is pretty wild. And he made it into the lineup for the Seattle Kraken in the playoffs this year in their 2nd ever season. He already has 5 points in just 9 games, with I believe 3 of them are goals.
Yeah.
They've been in big games, big moments. He scored in game 6, I believe, for Seattle as well, just the other night. He's been huge for them and could be a legitimate factor for them going forward. Just a really fun story to watch. And I hope it keeps going for him. I hope he stays on the team. He's making it pretty hard for them to take him out of the lineup. Plays really hard, and he's got a really great shot. So Kartye is my prospect of the week here. To wrap us up, Peter, who is your prospect of the week this week?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to 2024, and I'm taking Sam Dickinson from the London Knights. I'm not sure if I've selected him before, but I have probably talked about him. But I'm really excited for what he could do next season. Obviously, he's getting some sheltered minutes, production, 23 points in the regular season. He already has, I believe, 7 right now in 17 games in the postseason, which is really good considering that, he is still a rookie skater. But it's what he's doing with the puck and like the shot that he has from the point. It is a powerful, powerful shot, great accuracy. He can rip it, but at the same time, he's got a very well-rounded defensive game as well. And he's very strong in transition. He's a smooth skater. He has the makings of a complete defenseman. And I wouldn't be surprised if obviously I do think he's going to surpass all these totals. He's going to gain more minutes. He's going to gain more important ice time. Or more important situations, and he's going to rise to the occasion. And I think he's going to be a very steady riser, possibly a top 10 pick in next year's draft. Whether he's going to be the top defender remains to be seen, but I do have confidence that he's going to be a top 10 selection based on the overall package that he's already displaying right now in his rookie year.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam Dickinson has been great. And it reminded me of actually in our mock draft here, I didn't point it out, but we didn't have any defensemen go until the top 10 picks were out. So, 10th overall, David Reinbacher. And it does feel like a year. We've talked all year about how there's a lack of high-end defensive prospects here. It feels like teams are going to reach on prospects on D, which means that if you're picking just after those, then you're going to get good forward prospects a little later than maybe you should. But a big reason why teams shouldn't be reaching on defensemen this year is that next year's draft has a ton of great D prospects. We'll talk about them soon, I'm sure. Ivan Levshunov, Aaron Kiviharju, Sam Dickinson. There's plenty we'll get to. There could be as many of them in the top 16 next year as there are forwards. I wouldn't be shocked. Plenty that are looking really promising right now. So not necessary to reach on one of 2 or 3 guys at the very top of this draft. But you could, there's still good players, don't get me wrong, but but you can probably get more value somewhere else. Look forward to next year. Sam Dickinson, it's a great pick, Peter. Well, that does it for us this week. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Prospect Corner. Make sure you subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel to make sure you don't miss the rest of our episodes. Also, make sure you check out our site, thehockeywriters.com, for tons of 2023 NHL draft coverage in the next few months. The draft is 45 days away from now, so just another 6 weeks or so, which is pretty wild. Make sure you check out the Hockey Writers. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Matt. And thank you all for watching this week's episode of Prospect Corner. We'll see you next time.